argument on the counter side on that issue?
Well, my experience has always been with a manual system, so it's a little hard to argue since I'm only here for a few months. The obvious advantage of an automatic train operation is that you can probably get a little bit more capacity and more reliability.
In theory, your headways can be smaller.
A little bit, but more importantly, just like when you're driving a car down a highway, and if one person slows down a little bit more than the other, just for whatever reason, you'll tend to slow the rest of the traffic. And the same thing could be when you're in manual operation. One operator will operate just slightly differently than the other, maybe slow down in one area that another one would not. So that will tend to reduce your capacity. However, before you, and especially in my view here with regard to AMATA, before you can return to an automatic train operation, we have to do that complete system safety analysis that the NTSB has recommended and carefully review the results of that. And then the board at that time, and with the expertise that will be provided to it, will have to make a decision on that.
Because I think you remember in the 70s, the big argument the engineer said was the human didn't even have to be on the car. And the lines I got while we were designing our systems was that you're going to have them in the car anyways, and if they're sitting there doing nothing, you not only lose attention, you end up having to pay them more for doing nothing than participate, because the stress, basically the fatigue, is higher for doing nothing than actually engaging. You have any experience in the relationship between that automated system? And let me just say this up front. I have to believe with modern technology that there is a way to integrate these two components and get the advantage of the human being in there and tap more into the advantage of the human, but still being able to utilize technology. A good example is this configuration of how close the cars operate or whatever. I think there's ways that technology, especially with the new high-tech stuff going on, that we can really take advantage of increasing efficiency still more, but having more safety and really tapping into the safety of having a human in the cab. The oversight people at all even consider looking at that in this report?
The Safety Board has looked at automation in all modes of transportation, and you raise an excellent point, because one of the key issues is that you have got to get the human in the loop. And so with respect to human-centered automation, the Safety Board sees technology and automation as being a very powerful tool to provide a safety redundancy to human beings in the event that they have lapses, errors, failures, mistakes. It is very important to keep the human in the loop when you're designing the system. And in fact, we made a recommendation to Metro coming out of our 1996 investigation of the Shady Grove accident. At the time, Metro was operating an automatic all the time. And after that accident, it occurred on icy rails where there wasn't good traction for the wheels. The train oversped, and the operator was not able to stop as it came in at the end of the line and it hit another train. We actually made a recommendation to Metro that they needed to train their employees to operate in manual and not rely on automatic all of the time, and to recognize that you can't always rely on the technology to operate the train. And so based on that recommendation, Metro did change how they operated their trains, and they operated in automatic during rush periods, but in manual during other periods. And that was significant because after this accident, they went to all manual on all lines all the time. They had a workforce that was experienced operating in manual that might not have otherwise been if they hadn't changed the mix. And so we have found that automation can be a problem, whether it's in aviation, in the cockpit, on the trains. We do see technology as a backup or redundant system for human failure.
Okay, thank you. I apologize, Madam Chair, but these things really are big questions. I know that was openly debated in the 70s. I'm old enough to remember that. But there are still school of thoughts here. I just think the redundancy, there's a whole lot of difference between having technology back up human than human backing up technology, because technology traditionally does not fatigue, does not text, does not get distracted. And that can't be said about human beings. So I know this seems like nitpicking, but I think it could be a major critical issue. And as soon as I saw this accident as somebody who comes from a transit background, that was the first question I had. And so I appreciate the chance to be able to dialogue here, and I appreciate the open and frank discussion on this. And I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bilbray. Final question for Mr. Durbinado. Mr. Durbinado, we have spent this time exclusively discussing Metro Rail because of the NTSB report and the spectacular nature of that tragedy, not to mention the other accidents where workers, for example, were killed. But I believe the riding public that you represent, in terms of the record of this hearing, would also want the rider's perspective on safety challenges confronting Metro bus and Metro access riders. I say that not in the abstract. We have had serious accidents here involving Metro buses at the same time there were Metro Rail accidents. Could you comment on that for us?
I think in the concern in those areas, in terms of Metro access and in terms of Metro bus, have to do with not with technology but with human error, with problems with attention or lack of attention,
And
traffic, and not mechanical failure, and then with Metro access in particular, the problems that come with that we've seen in the news with not transportation issues, but the sexual assaults that have occurred due to subcontracting out and not sufficient oversight of employees in those areas because of subcontracting.
Yeah, those have been very concerning to us all. We don't want to get off into another subject at this hearing, but we want to note those matters for the record. The chairman had indicated that he would make every effort to be back. He has now sent word that it has become impossible for him to come back, and has asked me to thank all the witnesses and members who attended this hearing today. There may be questions submitted to you in written form. Members will have 10 legislative days to do so. The subcommittee and full committee looks forward to continuing this very important beginning dialogue following the NTSB report. And could I just say, with respect to the quality of testimony that we have heard here today, that from each of you, the quality has been superb and invaluable, and we thank you very much for your testimony. This hearing is adjourned.